The UK government has said it wants tech companies to do more to remove this sort of content. Google, Facebook and Twitter say they already do a lot.
But I do think there is something that technology companies can do, and it's by looking at working in smaller communities instead of just considering the 2 billion people that use them. There are also groups that they can interact with and try and not censor but moderate and communicate with.
All of the tech companies refused our request for an interview. There's a lot of confusion in this debate and very little concrete detail. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
Well, Peter Warren is chairman of the Cyber Security Research Institute, and he joins me appropriately by Skype from Debenham in Suffolk. A very good evening to you, Mr. Warren. Well, Theresa May, as we've heard, calling for more transparency. Can it actually happen?
One of the real problems with this is encryption. A lot of these organisations are using encrypted messaging systems over and above the social media. So this is a very, very, very difficult job for them. It's not a difficult thing to do a Google search and to ask for how do I encrypt a message, and you will find a huge number of products that will come up and help you do that.
And one suspects that if the word got out that one of the big encryption services had a so-called backdoor into it, well then, of course, then the would-be jihadis just use another one.
They would use another one. They're very, very sensitive to all of this. I mean, you would be if you were involved in the sort of work that they do, the horrible work that they do. So, yeah, of course, that's going to be what will happen.
But what about the big tech companies? I mean, they have been lambasted by the Prime Minister, by the Home Secretary, for not trying hard enough. What's your assessment of how hard they are trying to cooperate?
I think the big tech companies are cooperating now. I think that this has gone on for a long time. At one point, back in 1996, when they just said that they were conduits, they may have had a bit of an argument. But now, so many of the social media companies actually produce technology or images themselves or disseminate that information. So I actually do think that they do have something of a responsibility now.
But when one looks at, video sharing sites, and the biggest of them all, for instance, YouTube, I mean, there must be millions and millions and millions of pieces of information uploaded on an hourly basis.
Well, that's the big problem, isn't it? I think there's 400 hours of video go up a minute onto YouTube. So to try to deal with that amount of traffic is, as you say, that is a terrible, terrible problem. But it's one of the things that the government is arguing that you should be able to use technology to deal with. That is a relatively simple thing to say. It is a huge task to try to deal with that volume of information.
But with the big ones, it begs this bigger question, doesn't it? Where they say, by and large, they're platforms, and in many other areas, people are saying, well, no, in my own industry, in the television industry, saying, well, you're actually not. You're publishers as well.
Well, I actually think that that's the big debate that's beginning to take place now, which is you can't avoid responsibility if you actually are disseminating information. If you take Sky News, for example, you know that the output that you send out has to conform to certain journalistic requirements. Again, this is something that the social media companies are now going to have to bite the bullet on. They can't just say, actually, that stuff goes out there and we have no responsibility for it. That's going to be very difficult for them to argue.
And the fundamental problem, of course, it's called the World Wide Web. And this is the United Kingdom. You just can't police 99.9% of it from this country.
I think that is an issue, and I think that, again, what's happening is just exposing the sort of weaknesses that have been developing for a very, very long time. There isn't an overarching body that can perhaps deal with implementing some of the changes that are needed to be made, but it's something that we do have to start looking at. There is the need for several organisations to start to develop in very many different spaces to do with the internet and to do with cybersecurity as well.
And here's, I suppose, almost a secret squirrel question. I mean, do you imagine that, the security services aren't going to tell us this, that they've made more headway into breaking end-to-end encryption than they make out?
I think that you can never say that that hasn't happened. All you have to do is look at the Snowden revelations, which for a long time people were saying that that wasn't possible, that for Snowden or for the Snowden revelations to actually work, that the security services would have had to have developed enough capability to be able to take all of the information that was online and be able to analyse that offline. People said they couldn't do that. We find out from Snowden that they could do that. So they're not going to say if they have done that. That is, that would give, as you said earlier, that would give the terrorists an advantage, or they would know that they should try to find some other method of communication.
Great getting your thoughts, Mr. Warren. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Warren there. And this is Sky News Tonight. Coming up next, we'll be talking police cuts and asking, should